Alrighty, well, welcome to the Adventures in Contract Development talk. I am Tim. You can find me at TJ Lytle on Twitter, or if email is more your thing, you can always shoot me an email, tim@timlytle.net. Very hard to find me. I've been doing contract development for the past 10 or so years. For the past 2 years, I've also done part-time developer evangelism for Nexmo. That is why I'm at Tech. We sponsored for the past 3 years. So if you don't know about Nexmo, you should come see me at our table over in the sponsor place, and I will tell you all about Nexmo. But for here, I'm talking about my experience as a contract developer, not giving this as a sponsor of Tech. First time I gave this talk in public was 2 years ago, and it was at the Uncon at Tech. And I got some very passionate reactions to it, so I thought that was worthwhile submitting again. They didn't accept the talk last year, but they asked me to write an article for PHP Architect. So I wrote the article for PHP Architect. It was kind of oddly personal, because it wasn't about PHP, and it wasn't just about general contracting. It was about how I specifically contracted. So when I sent the article off, I felt, I don't know if I'd say vulnerable, but it just felt weird because I was talking about my personal life in this technical magazine. But the responses came back, and there were a lot of people that were interested in what I had to say, worth enough for me to submit the talk again. And the response I generally get, either from the article or for when I give this talk, is there's two basically. One is, I tried contracting, I hated it, and I did exactly the opposite of everything you say in this talk. The other response I get is, if only I would have known this before I started, or this makes sense, this is how I approach it. So hopefully you'll enjoy the talk today. It's only 30 minutes, so I believe I have time for Q&A at the end, hopefully. If not, there's lunch after this, and we can certainly sit down at a table and talk about any questions you may or may not have. So when I gave this a Tech 2 years ago, someone in the audience goes, "So you develop contracts?" And I was like, no. And they were serious. So if you came here because you thought this was a talk about writing legal contracts, I am sorry. There are a few other talks you might want to go to. But it makes me think that I should probably define what I mean by contract developer. And I'm going to define that by, first off, saying there's a lot of different definitions, and I'm going to tell you what I'm not. But the disclaimer is, this is what works for me. It's not saying that these other things aren't good. It's not saying that you shouldn't do these other things. And what works for me may not work for you, but hopefully exploring how I look at this problem and how I relate with it will help you get a better understanding of how, if you're a contractor, how you look at the situation, or if you're interested in becoming a contractor, how you're going to approach it as you start. So first, let's talk with what I'm not. I'm not the briefcase. These are what you may consider a traditional contractor. They work for one company for 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years. They're essentially an employee that doesn't have benefits. That's not to say they're being taken advantage of, although that does happen. There are good reasons to structure yourself this way as a developer. But they have one company. They work pretty much 40 hours a week. They may even work on-prem. This is not what I do. I have many clients that I work on projects concurrently, and when one project ends, I'm not there scratching my head going, now I need to find the next project, because I have literally nothing else to do. I always have a couple projects ongoing. So I'm not at all the briefcase, although that's to say it's not that it's an invalid way to do contracting. There are plenty of people that do that and are very successful. It's just not how I approach the situation. I'm not the money funnel. This is the contractor that gets a job, and as soon as they have a job, they're like, hey, you over there, I'm going to subcontract you, I'll make a little bit, but this is, I'll pay you this, and we'll build this project together, brings on another contractor too, and they're always building like this ad hoc team for a project and subcontracting them all. Turns out that they're pretty much a web development shop that has no formal structure. This is also something that I don't do. I don't subcontract. Not saying it's an invalid way to be a contractor, it's just not what I do. I work directly with my clients, and I don't work with anybody underneath me. And there's the moonlighter. Probably the closest to what I do. This is the person who has a real job and does things on the side, nights, weekends, maybe has a few small clients. It's similar to what I do. The only difference is this is my real job. I don't have, I have maybe more clients than they do, but it's very similar in the fact that I'm not just exclusively with one client. I have many going on, and I bounce from client project to client project. Freelance is probably the term that best applies, But I find that when you say you're a freelancer, people think that it's one of two things. Either it's something that you do on the side, or it's like, oh, you couldn't get a real job? You say, like, I'm a freelance developer, and like, are you looking for full-time employment someplace? It's like, no, this is what I do. So the term freelance actually comes from the terms free and lance, as in a knight who does not have an allegiance and will basically fight for money. So to update the term freelancer a little bit, maybe it's better just to say, I'm a mercenary. I'm not a contract developer, I'm not a freelance developer, I'm a mercenary developer. And I think that communicates a lot of what I do. I'm in it for the money. You have a problem you want solved, you can pay me and I'll do it. I don't believe in your idea. I don't want equity in your company. I want to solve the problem, make the money, and move on. So how does a mercenary developer approach this concept of contract development? Well, first, I'm the product. At one of our PHP meetups, our local user group, I remember one developer talking about how she was frustrated. She was building these pages for a client, and they kept on asking for the same pages. Like, it was, I don't know, a couple a month. They were basically the same thing, just reforming the content, putting it together, and she found, she was billing hourly, she found that the more she did it, the less money she made, because her hours would go down. And she thought, I'm losing money because I'm billing hourly. I would rather sell pages, and then if I increase my productivity, if I increase my efficiency, I increase my profit. Which makes complete sense if you're manufacturing things. So if you're making cars, makes complete sense. If you're producing oil, makes complete sense. If you're harvesting grain, makes complete sense. If you're building web pages or websites or web applications, I'm not sure it does. It only makes sense when the thing that you're building is inherently reproducible, easy to just spit out the same thing over and over again. But once you do that, the next logical step is, well, if I can increase my efficiency and increase my profit, then why wouldn't I increase my productivity by hiring more people, produce even more of this thing that I am selling, and make even more money? And at that point in time, you're a web development shop that specializes in one very particular product that you make over and over again. And that's fine, but I'm a contract developer. I want the freedom of being a contractor. I don't want to run a web development shop. So I don't sell pages, I don't sell sites, I don't sell applications. I am the product. So some contractors may argue, no, I do. I charge per project or whatever. I would argue that while they may be selling this concept of a finished project or an app or a website, what their client is really buying is the contractor. The client isn't wanting just this website made. They're wanting that contractor to make the website. So the client's buying the product of the contractor. The contractor thinks they're selling the product of the website, and there's a bit of a value mismatch there that I don't think works out well in favor of the contractor in how they structure the rest of their business. So if I'm the product, though, I need to be unique. There needs to be a reason why someone wants to hire me. There's this, I don't know if I want to say fad, but this idea where people don't want to be called a PHP developer. They don't want to be called a web developer. They want to be just a developer. And they say, hey, whatever problem you throw at me, I can solve. May work if you work in a company that throws a lot of different problems at you. But if it's a client trying to hire a developer, they don't want to go to you and say, hey, I got this problem. Do you think you can solve it? And you say, yeah, I can solve almost any problem. I've not seen this one before, but you better believe I can solve it. And they're going to be like, okay, that's nice. How about you? Can you solve this problem? You say, yeah, I've solved problems like that all the time. I specialize in that problem. Who are they going to hire? So if you're a contractor, you don't want to be a generalist. You want to be a specialist. You want to make sure there's a reason people are buying the product, and the product is you. Just as much as I don't want to sell a commodity of sites, pages, applications, I don't want to be just a developer. I need to be the developer that they want to buy. Because once I get the contractor, or once I get the client to start buying me, they can't go anywhere else for that. They like working with me, and now I've won a client that's going to keep coming back because they don't want just pages. They want me to build whatever it is that they are looking for. So how do I sell me? How do I sell this product? I could sell my kidneys, but after I sell 2 of them, I'm out of luck. So what else do I have that I can sell that represents me? For me, the only renewable resource I can think of that I have is time. So I bill hourly. It may not be hourly for you, maybe it's weekly, maybe it's daily, maybe it's monthly, however you structure it. If you are the product, the thing that you're selling is your time. So what does this mean? It means there's no fixed bids, and it also means that the rate doesn't change depending on the job. It doesn't matter if you're hiring me to do something hard or to do something easy. You're not paying for the thing to be done. You're paying for me to do the thing. Saying that the rate differs depending on how hard it is like saying an ISP should charge you not for how much bandwidth you use, but for what you use it for. That's ridiculous. It's like it's like going to a hardware store and buying a hammer, and they're like, well, are you going to hit nails with this? You're like, well, I don't know. Like, this is Chicago. You can break kneecaps with this? I'm like, maybe. Is there a difference? Oh, yeah, it's more expensive if it's kneecaps. It's a hammer. Same thing applies to me. If I'm the product, my rate remains the same regardless of what you're doing. I had one client who hired me to do something his developer couldn't quite get done. It's something that I happen to specialize in. It took me about 2 hours to do it. And he's like, this is awesome. Can you do this for me? And I was like, I don't think you want me to do that for you. Anyone who can edit HTML can do that. You don't want to pay me to do this. No, 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 you are awesome. I want to pay you to do this. I'm like, I don't think you do. It's going to take me a lot of time, and you don't want to pay. No, no, no. Obviously, it didn't work out. Because in his mind, he just wanted to pay for the thing to be done. But what I'm selling isn't the thing to be done. I'm selling me, the product. So that gets us into this place where you may say, yeah, clients like fixed bids. How do you possibly structure this if you're saying bill hourly and clients like to know what is it going to cost me up front? I'd submit that while clients may think that they like fixed bids, it rarely works out well for anyone. See, because once you have a fixed bid, the client's going there and saying, well, this is the application I want. Do they really want that application? Do they really want that website? Or is what they're actually looking for is someone to come along and help them realize what website, what application they actually want? If we structure things fixed and not hourly, we end up hating feature changes. We end up hating the client going, well, you know, we've tested this and we think this is better over here. We think we want to change this. We complain that that's the worst thing about clients is they're always changing what they want. Shouldn't we let them? Why are we building what they wanted 2 months ago instead of what they really need right now? Hourly billing is what lets you do that. Say, oh, I need this feature change. Well, it's going to take 2 or 3 hours. Is it worth it? Yeah, that's important enough. So the goal here is to enable the client to get what they actually need and to you to build what they actually want instead of some concrete spec that was made months ago that no one really cares about anymore. There is a downfall too. If I'm the product and I'm billing hourly, that means, well, there's a maximum amount of time that I can charge for. It's only 24 hours in the day. I got to kind of sleep for part of that. So at some point, I reach the most amount of time I can bill. And there's some upper limit on the rate. There's some ridiculous rate where no one in the world would ever pay that. And then it's just like a little underneath that where one person would. And then you drop it a little lower, and then you get a little bit more clients until you go all the way down, and everybody's going to pay that. So, but there's some maximum amount of rate, maximum amount of time. So that means there's a maximum amount of profit I can make. It's a weird kind of ceiling. You may find that, all right, however you want to look at it, maybe I make X amount of dollars a year. Well, I can go through and say, well, I'm going to increase my rate. Increase my rate, I find that now the pool of clients that will pay that has gotten smaller. Okay, but they're still there. So there's less clients paying me, but I'm making more per hour. So I'm working less hours, but in the end, I may end up making exactly the same thing I made the last year. So there's some ceiling to working this way. I'm never going to IPO for $1 bazillion. That's not going to happen. However, being a contract developer offers the flexibility that I can try stuff that might be ridiculously successful without having to take the risk of someone who's traditionally employed to say, well, I'm leaving my job to go try this thing, which will more than likely fail, but might be successful. I have the flexibility to kind of try that while having a bit of this, something that I know that I can ramp down clients, ramp back up clients, keep everything in balance, and take more of a responsible risk to try something that might be crazy successful. But some people out there might say, well, I know how you can scale. You can scale by just hiring other contractors, subcontracting, and taking a cut of what they get paid. You can, but what does taking that cut cost you? Two things. It costs you your time, because you spend time managing them. You spend time communicating what the client communicates to you to them, because if the client's communicating directly to them, what are you doing? You also inherit responsibility. If you bill the client 10 hours for the other subcontractor and the code doesn't work and you have to fix it, you can't really bill them the 3 hours it takes you to fix it, because you already charged them for the wrong code and you're responsible for the person that you're subcontracting to. It's risky, and it costs me time. That's how I bill. It costs me responsibility, which is essentially my reputation. That's what I'm selling, but it's not sold the same way I know how to sell that. So it's not something I'm interested in doing. I could do the same thing with, say, hosting. I could host my clients' sites for them, make a little money, charge them a little bit more. What happens when the server goes down in the middle of the night? They call me. I don't want them to call me. I don't want them to be upset at me. I want them to be upset at Rackspace or Amazon. Is there anybody from Amazon here? Good. Never goes down. So, oh, is that okay? They're giving another talk. Perfect. So I inherit the same thing if I try to resell services. It takes me time. It takes me responsibility. And now my cut is kind of fixed, and all the rest of these are unknown. It's not to say that I don't recommend other developers work with my clients. It's not to say that I don't recommend services for my client. I just bill them the way I know to bill them. If I say, hire this guy, he's really good, and it takes us some time to get them up to speed, well, I bill my time, because that's what I bill. If I say, you should use this hosting provider, and for some reason something catastrophically goes wrong, and I have to jump in and help fix it, I bill my time. I'm not representing that somehow it running is my responsibility. No. If it takes the time, it takes the time, because that's what I know how to bill. So that's my philosophy for contract developing. Or being a mercenary developer. Here's a few tips. Programming, more practical tips. Programming is what makes me money. So I'm going to avoid everything else that doesn't. I don't want to track my time. I don't want to send out invoices. I don't want to watch the mailbox and see whose check came in and send out reminders and say, hey, did you forget to pay me? And I know people are like, well, then you just need better clients. No, even good clients can forget to send out a check. I just don't want to be bothered monitoring all that. So my tip is don't do what you don't do. Automate everything else as much as possible. The service I use is Odesk. Basically, I do Control-Alt page up, and it starts billing my client. I do Control-Alt page down, it stops. And I walk away from my desk, I play with my kids, and in 2 weeks I get money in the bank. That is all I do, ever. You may not want to outsource that much, but you should try to outsource as much as you can. You're never really going to be happy if you're working for less than what you think you're worth. So there's very little advantage to negotiating on rate. If that's what you're selling, if that's what you feel your value is, don't let someone else tell you it's less. You'll never be happy working for that client. Even if there's a client that comes along like, we can't afford it, can you just give us a discount? I would rather, and have done, worked for a client for free than giving them a discount. Because a client you give a discount to doesn't think, they're doing me a favor. They think, I'm paying wholesale, they're paying retail. They expect the same product, the same attention, the same time, the same availability that clients that are paying your full rate are getting, because they think, well, they just got the wholesale rate. You do something as a favor to somebody for free, they don't think that. Or worst case scenario, when you say, this is crazy, I'm just walking away, they're not saying, give me all my money back. You work for free. If they're like, no, I need to pay you something, then when it's done, pay me what you think it's worth. That'll be an interesting experience for you. You'll learn a lot about the people that you're working with. If the client's budget is roughly the same as the minimum you think it's going to take to get done, then you're probably not going to be writing good code. So as much as possible, overestimate, overbid the time, the money, whatever it is that it's going to take. That's going to give you two things. It's going to give you the flexibility for when something goes wrong. And we all know as developers, when you're writing code, nothing unexpected ever comes up, right? It's also going to give you happy clients. Because I told the client, I'm thinking like 15 to 20 hours for this. And when it's all said and done, unlike someone who fixed bids and says, well, this is what it's going to cost, and I'm just going to charge you that regardless, I charge them per hour. And when I only bill them 11 hours, they go, that guy is awesome. I want to work more with him. Because I thought I was going to have to pay this much. Look how much we have left over. And I felt comfortable because I know if something goes catastrophically wrong, they're not going to be saying, you said it's only going to be 20 hours. Now, you would probably argue that this means there are certain projects I don't get because the client is price sensitive and they say, you know, I just got to go with the guy that's cheaper. That may be true. Question is that the client that you want? Don't think about getting projects. Think about getting clients. You may lose a project, but do you really want a client that is always, with a budget that is always right there on the edge of going over? Or do you want a client that goes, no, no, I want to work with you. I don't care that you're more expensive. You find those clients, they will stay with you for the long run. So don't think about getting just projects and what do I have to bid, or what do I have to set my rate at, or what do I have to set my estimate at to get a project. Think of what I have to do to get the client that I want. And then you start thinking of, well, if projects fall off because they can't afford me, all I'm doing is filtering away clients that, you know, really would be more frustration than they would be profit for me. But speaking of clients, let's take a look at some client types. These aren't clients necessarily to avoid. These are clients to be aware of. There's the employer. This is the person who wants you available on Skype 9 to 5, right? They're like, oh, yeah, I sent you an email. Why don't you respond right away? They have a problem understanding the difference between an employee and a contractor. Now, it may be they just need some education to say, hey, completely different things. Employees are around all the time because you're paying them for that. Contractors aren't because you're only paying them for whatever work they're doing, so you can't expect the same amount of availability. So some education may just help to make this a good client. However, they may know the difference and are just looking for inexperienced contractors that they can treat like employees that they only have to pay when they work. If that's the case, then obviously that would be someone to avoid. There are some clients that hear no more than when you say at least this much. So you say, it's going to take at least 10 hours. I'm like, that's great. We have a budget that's just right at 10 hours. No, wait. That's not just great. That's actually very bad. But this client may just be a happy person. They may be a glass half full. In that case, it may be great. You know, they're not going to see the site as half broken. They're going to see the site as mostly working. However, a lot of the time, the problem is they've already committed to a budget with an investor, with their own client, their own customer, and everything you're telling them, they're putting through the filter of, I've already decided that it's only going to take this much stuff. So I'm going to hear you say, yes, you were right, it's going to take this much stuff. To be successful with this client, first they need a dose of reality. Occasionally you'll work for a client where the first thing they do is say, we set you up with an email address at our domain. And then you're in a conference call and they're like, my colleague, Tim. And I'm like, your colleague? I'm not a colleague, I'm a contractor. Those are some warning flags. These are clients that want people to think you're part of them. Why do they want to think that? Maybe sometimes it's just they're ashamed that they had to go out and hire someone from the outside to do something that they represented to their customer, their client, whoever they're working with, they could do internally. The issue comes from the fact that they're essentially trading on your reputation. And if you go all the way back to the beginning, if you're the product and they're trading on your reputation, is that something you really want them to do? This takes a bit of discretion, because part of your relationship from a contractor to a client is the fact that you honor the fact that sometimes there's things they don't want you to mention, things they don't want you to talk about. They may not want you going, shouting, yes, I'm a contractor for this company, they've hired me. But at the same time, if you're the product, you don't necessarily want them representing that the work you do is somehow a reflection of the work they do, especially because the fact that you are even there means they may have tried to do it and couldn't. So this is just something to be aware of, and it really falls into how comfortable you are dealing with that. You're definitely going to run across this one if you try contracting. The shopper is the person who walks along and like, hey, I just need someone to take this project over. It's 90% done. There's just 10% left. The other developer just couldn't get to it. And then you dig a little further and you find out, well, the other developer inherited it from that other developer who I think got it from the guy before. Before you can have success with this client, you need to find out what the real problem is. If they've gone through 3 or 4 contractors before you, the chances are they haven't just had 3 or 4 bad contractors. They're somewhat contributing to the problem. Is the fact that they just keep on changing what that last 10% is, and they're just not happy with whatever anybody does? Is the problem that they say it's 90% done, but it's really 10% done? I mean, a go-kart that goes down 90% of the track, but not up the 10% that's uphill, because it doesn't have an engine, isn't 90% done. So before you can have success with this, you need to identify why previous contractors have not been successful. If you can do that, then you very well may be able to have success here. If not, it probably will not end well. I doubt many of us would go to a 5-star restaurant, take out a notepad, and scribble down like 5 ingredients, a couple cooking techniques, hand it to the waiter and say, hey, go give this to the chef, tell him that's what I want. You're there at the restaurant because the chef is the expert. You want him to make you the food that tastes good because he knows how to make good tasting food. The architect is the client that tells you how to build what they want, not what they want. They may come to you and say, so we need this form to collect data, and this is, you should submit it to this MySQL table, and here's the fields. And as developers, we go, yeah, I know how to do that. There's a form and there's fields, and I can set that all up without thinking and taking a step back and saying, wait a second. Do they even know what they're talking about, or do they think they know MySQL because at one point in time they had some shared hosting environment that had PHP MyAdmin? And they're like, no, I know databases. If the architect is actually an architect and you're working for a firm that just needs some extra help and they really do know what they're doing, it can work out great. If they're not, if they're like a hobbyist developer trying to tell you how to build the thing without telling you what the thing is they want, you need to take a step back and convince them, hey, the reason you're hiring me is because you can't do this. So tell me what you want, and let's talk about what the best way to implement it is. If you don't do that, you end up going down this track where you implement what they say to implement, technically the way they say it, and then you realize why they did hire you. It's because they don't know how to do it. So what's the perfect client? Well, it's really kind of the absence of all this. It's the person that knows they hired you because you're the expert. They come to you and say, hey, here's the idea. What do you think? Is this possible? How would you implement this? Is there problems that you see with this? Tell me what you think about this. I realize it's just my idea. Is it possible? They're the client that has no problem representing that you're a contractor. They're not ashamed of it. They're like, hey, I found this great contractor. She's amazing. I wish she would be hired full time, but she won't. But we're working with her for right now because she's an expert in this field. You're looking for a client that understands that as a contractor, they don't have the monopoly on your time or your availability. You work with other clients, and even though it may be an emergency to them, there may be other more pressing emergencies to you. If they wanted you all the time, they would hire you all the time. And you want a client that understands that when you say, hey, it's at least going to take this much time, they go, okay, well, we'll make sure that we have this much budget just to make sure we fit in that. Those are the best clients. So that's the talk. That's my philosophy on contract development. Every one of those client types are client types that I have run across in the past and learned a lot from. Definitely, if you like the talk or if you hated it, rate it on Joined In so Eli knows whether he should ever have me back again. And we do have all of 1 minute, so make the questions fast. Anybody? Anybody other than him? Oh, come on. I'll get to you. Yes? You want to make all the slides into a larger poster? You certainly could. Huge poster. I think if it was available, PHP Architect would probably sell it. So, yes?
So you talked about your philosophy of billing by the hour.
Yeah.
So how do you handle mistake that you didn't anticipate?
Good question. So when I screw up royally, how do I bill for that? I actually answer that question if any of you Stack Overflow, right? We're developers, everybody Stack Overflow. There's a freelance section of Stack Overflow. I answer that question in detail there. Remember, so if I'm the product, I'm selling essentially, in some cases, my reputation, right? So if I screwed up and I'm billing way more time than I should ever be billing for this thing that I'm building, that's going to hurt my reputation. So it's kind of like this weird, there's no real concrete answer. But if I feel like I'm undervaluing what my client thinks I am, then I'm not going to bill that time because that's going to hurt me later on. That's going to devalue my product. So when I screw up, if it's really a screw up, I may not bill the time. It kind of depends on the client. It kind of depends on the situation. If it's something that the client was aware that I am not the expert in, this is, you threw something at me new. You're like, hey, you built this whole system. We need to add this little component on there. And I go, I don't even know how that works. Give me about 5 or 6 hours to play around with it. I do, and I'm like, it's completely broken. I don't know what's going on. If they're aware of that and they're not thinking, well, Tim is the expert on this, he should know how to do it, then that's fine. But if it's something that really I should have known better, then I'll discount the time.
So if you've never really done this before, how do you really find out what you need to charge?
How do you determine your rate when you're just starting? Yeah, it's impossible. You can kind of, if you have an established reputation, you've been a developer already, you can kind of figure out, oh, this is what I make, in my real job, this is what it would be hourly. Remember though, that hourly billing isn't like the equivalent of, oh, it's just 40 hours a week, my salary divided by 40 hours a week. It's not. There's no way you can contract, develop, at least the way I'm talking about, with multiple clients, different projects, not just at one client 40 hours a week. So your rate is going to be more than what the hours they pay you for a salaried job. Figure it out. If you're starting out and you don't have the experience as a contractor, you're probably going to have to make your rate a little lower, because going from traditional employment to contracting is not a one-to-one thing. There's a whole lot more that clients would expect you to have, but it should be close. You should be able to kind of use what you're already charging your real job to give you a feel. Or look at it this way: you're the product, right? What do I have to pay you per hour to not do whatever else you want to do? Charge that. If someone's willing to pay it, then great. If someone's not, then you have to think, I need to change this product. I need to make this product better. So I'm going to go with Bala because he did raise his hand, even though he knows me, and is just here to heckle.
I'm not. No, this is a legit question. So you had mentioned the funnel.
The money funnel.
The money funnel. And you preface this whole talk that this is you, your personality. Do you think that someone could be multiple roles at the same time, or is it just not working for you?
Okay, so can someone be multiple roles? Do you mean can someone be like both the briefcase and the money funnel, or could someone actually execute the money funnel and make money on it?
A funnel and a mercenary.
Okay, so could you do both? Yeah, to some extent. If you're comfortable with that switching, it's just one of the great things I love about contracting is the freedom. And as soon as you start this, you lose a lot of freedom. You lose a lot of control. I just find it much better to say, hey client, hire this person directly. If you need me to help them out, I'll help them out, but work with them directly. Better than being like this conduit, because you start turning into a web development shop. And if that's something that you kind of like aspire to be or want to do part-time or think, I want to explore to see if this is something I like, yeah, you can definitely do both at the same time. It's just something that I'm not interested in doing. Yes?
So right now I've been contracting for about 2 years. All my clients are basically comfortable with it, which is great.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of looking to branch out some more, get involved with some startups and stuff. What do you recommend for kind of branching out beyond that immediate network that you have?
Okay, so the question is, working as a contractor for 2 years, and most of your clients are word of mouth, how do you expand outside of your normal network? Do things like write in PHP Architect, go to conferences like this, network as much as possible. One of the benefits of not subcontracting, but kind of like connecting clients with other contractors that they can use, is you kind of increase the visibility you have. More people know about you, they're like, and you stop having this like go-to person of, oh, it's me and these 3 other guys and we just kind of contract together. It's me and one guy that I said to hire, and then these other 2 people that they already had, now they know about me. So do stuff like that. be online. The one thing I did is if there was a technology I was interested in that I wanted to do, I would just go to Odesk or whatever job site you might want to try online and just bid for those jobs. Because and you may lower your rate for that, because again, so if I'm saying my rate is my rate regardless of whether it's hard or easy, there's little distinction. There's a difference with half the time I'm learning, half the time I'm executing. Well, now that makes sense. It makes sense to cut the rate on that, because part of this is being reinvested in me to make me a better developer. So that's not like hard or easy. That's like, am I the expert, or am I just like going, oh, I need to read a lot of docs? So you may have to lower it to get those jobs, but then build up your reputation in one niche, and then that niche will spread outside. That's not your normal word of mouth marketing. That's like one technology, one product. For me, it was a couple different APIs I did a lot of integration with. People would find out about that because they would be using these APIs from all over, and oh yeah, Tim, he knows how to integrate that. So that's the way that I expanded a little bit of the local versus everywhere.
You touched on the idea that your time is your ceiling.
Yeah.
And there's like this inverse relationship of how much you charge versus how many clients will pay that. And so, with that in mind, have you done any research or thought about this idea of doing value-based pricing, where you're not actually selling time or not using time as a currency, but you look at it more from a higher up perspective, and it's not the client's not buying you as a tool, but they're coming to you with a problem and you have a solution, and you charge them appropriately based on what it's worth to the client for you to solve their problem.
Yeah. No, I'm familiar with the question is versus I'm saying measure what I sell in time versus start selling value to the client, because one client solving the same exact problem may be more valuable to them than another small business. Yes, I'm familiar with it. I don't see it working for me. To me, it's like it's so contrary to the perspective I approach it from, that to me, I don't care necessarily how valuable it is to you. It's my time. How much do you have to pay me to not play with my kids another hour? And whether that means you get a lot of value or a little value or wherever that falls, that's kind of, in that case, I know I could capitalize on that if I wanted to. There'd be a way probably. It's just not the perspective I take, because it doesn't work for me mentally. Eli, we're like 5 minutes. Do I need to stop? And it's just like if they're not hungry, we can keep. Okay. Yes.
Before you did contract, do you have a real job? I'm wondering as far as like switching over.
Yeah. So the question is, have I ever had a real job, or is this just a made-up thing I did? I did. I had a associate's degree in electronics engineering and no jobs when I got out of a trade school. So I took a job at a web development company that went out of business a year later. And I pretty much learned PHP doing that, and I was like, well, I started, this was when I was much younger, just out of college, so very little money that I needed to worry about making, right? Unlike the keynote this morning, I didn't actually want to make little money, but I didn't need to make a whole lot of money. So I started actually just doing like IT consulting locally, and found that it didn't work at all for me. I then started trying to do fixed bid contracting online, and found that it worked, but I hated it because I was never making the right amount of money. It was always frustrating. It was around 2006 is when Odesk released their model publicly, which was hourly billing through an online marketplace, and I latched onto that and loved it. So for me, the benefit was there could be like this kind of transition phase. I didn't have a wife, I didn't have 3 kids back then. I didn't have to be like, well, how am I gonna go from one thing to the other? If you're doing a transition phase like that, you start out as the moonlighter. Start getting a feel for what contracting's like by maybe seeing if you can work a little less at your real job and take on some contracts on the side, because it's not just well, I was a PHP developer and now I'm a contract PHP developer. There's a whole additional skill set that goes with this more micro interaction between a client and you when you're building software, as a sole developer, that you'll need to kind of get up to speed with before you can actually charge the rate that you may feel comfortable with. So, the transition period would make sure you have, a way to do both for a while. like I said, like moonlighting, and then go, okay, this is making sense. I'm seeing how this works. I'm going to get a couple more contracts together. And for me, the important thing is I've always had more than one client on a project at a time. It's not like I just had this one big job and then I'm done going, well, where's the money? I always, if someone wants to talk to me and say, hey, I got this job, I don't know, are you busy? I mean, yeah, I'm incredibly busy, but I want to talk to you. I want to know what your project is, because I want as much as possible to convince you that I'm worth waiting until I have the time to execute on it. So, yes.
How do you handle a client who says to you, I can hire a guy in Bangalore for 1/10 of what your rate is?
Yeah, do it. The question is, so how do I handle a client that says, I can hire someone offshore that's 1/10 your rate? I routinely would bid on jobs where people are bidding $5 an hour. My rate is not $5 an hour. My rate is not 10 times $5 an hour. They should do it then. If that's what they want, I don't want that client. To me, that whole, well, I could get it cheaper somewhere else, just immediately tells me I don't ever want to work with you. And I've had some clients that have been like, well, you're really expensive. We have an offshore team we're going to put it to. And then they realized the offshore team took them. And it's not to say, here's the thing, and this sounds, phrased that way, it sounds horrible. It's not the fact that offshore teams are less good than onshore teams. The difference is when you're hiring someone that's 10 times less or a tenth or whatever the rate, they're not. There's a reason why the rate is that low. There's Russian programmers, there's Indian programmers, there's programmers in the Philippines that are billing the same rate I am, because they're worth it. It's not where you are geographically, and that's not in this presentation, but I've done it in a similar presentation. Because of what I do, to me, what I'm trying to think, it's a global economy anymore. I don't expect you to pay more just because I live anywhere. I expect you to pay more because I'm worth it. And so it's not so much of a geographic thing. It's just like, they could find a developer next door to me that's half my rate, a quarter of my rate. But there's a reason why that's what they're charging. This is what I'm charging. And if the client doesn't want to pay that, that's fine. I want to work with a client that goes, Tim, I want you, because that's going to be a long-term client. So for me, yeah, price. My prices discriminate what clients are interested in me, and I'm okay with that. Anyone else? Did I see a hand?
You already got it.
Oh, perfect. And now people are finally going, I'm hungry. All right. Well, thank you. Rate me on LinkedIn. Not LinkedIn. Joined in. Where's the URL? There we go. And I will be around at the Nexmo table if you have any questions. Enjoy.